The Mystery of BELICENA VILLCA. Second Book. The Letter of BELICENA VILLCA. 47th Day. General synthesis of the Hyperborean wisdom. While the Gauleans and the Celts were marching to Europe, the kingdom of Judah, in the Middle East, was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, and the population taken in captivity to Babylon in the year 597 before Christ. They were liberated in 536, and, 20 years later, in 516, they reconstructed the Temple of Solomon, without finding the Ark with the tablets of the law. In the 4th century, were dominated by the Greeks of Alexander, and in the 1st century, allied with Romans against the Greeks, 140 before Christ. After the death of Julius Caesar, the Roman Senate gave the title of King of Judea to Herod I, in the year 37 before Christ, and in the first year of the Christian era, or in 4 before Christ if it is desired, was born the Saviour, Jesus then as Erina, the Christ. After Herod I, Romans took away from the chosen people that possibility to have a king of their lineage, and placed a series of procurators that vainly tried to dominate the increasing social agitation. The crucifixion of Jesus, that never existed, or the fight against Christians, which is usually gave as explanation of the bellicose and suicidal attitude of the Jews, are not correct, being the real cause of the malaise the fact, perceived by all the members of the sacred race, that the Hebrew archetype would be thrown to the Gentiles, was palpable for them, in virtue of sharing the substance of the demiurge, that the staying action would be extended thereafter over the entire world. What not appeared so clear for them was, in which way, after the presence of Jesus Christ, could be fulfilled the ancient pact with Jehovah Satan, the promise that the sacred lineage would inherit the power over the other nations. Several centuries, and the work of eminent Kabbalistic rabbis would be necessary to obtain the recovery for the Hebrews about their faith, about their role on history. But, while the time was coming, the patience of the Romans ended quite before. In the year 70 after Christ, the general Titus destroyed Jerusalem, the Temple of Solomon, and dispersed the Jews to all the corners of the Roman Empire. With the diaspora of the year 70 begin the modern history of the chosen people, which culmination is imminent in our days, when the Synarchy gives to their hands the totality of the world power. When in the year 313, the Emperor Constantine the Great recognized Christianity as the official religion of the Roman Empire, began a difficult period for the sacred race. The reason was that in the people recently Christianized predominated the remembrance of blood of Christus Lucifer, over the Jewish archetype of Jesus Christ, fact that in almost every case produced a general anti-Jewish feeling. But, finally would enter triumph the permanent influence of the centric opposite ray, of Jesus Christ, over the Hyperborean remembrance, and the masses would end dazed. Meanwhile the sacred race would be in danger of being exterminated. But the threat soon would be avoided. If an effective danger really existed against the Hebrews, is something that we will have to doubt, because in the 5th century, Saint Benedict of Nursia found the order in which will enter, in mass, the Christian Gaulean, who will dedicate, since then, to mediate between the church and the synagogue. According to what I informed days before, the tablets of the law remain where Solomon had occulted, and were recently found by the Templar Gaulean in Middle Ages. Those tablets have been made by the demiurge Jehovah Satan to imitate the founder action of the Grail. It is necessary to inquire then, what was the Grail, the metaphysical model of the tablets? Contrarily to the question of the tablets of the law, which force to refer to facts of the history, the topic of the Grail will strictly take me to the esoteric field. But, in first place, it is convenient to clarify that the question has been badly propounded. I already clarified that the Grail mustn't have to be searched. I will add now that it treats of an object which is not possible to appropriate, and that, due to this, must be where it always was. It is a mistake, then, to search the Grail, and also to ask, what happened to it? But, you will wonder, how will have to be faced that mystery, then, to obtain some additional knowledge, free from paradoxes. The only way, in my opinion, to advance in the knowledge of the mystery, consists in to fathom more into the analogies that link to the guiding functions towards the origin of the Grail, external function, with the secret paths of spiritual liberation, of the Hyperborean wisdom, which are internal functions, guide us towards the origin. In this sense, can be established an analogy very meaningful between the stone Grail, of the Odal strategy, and the lapis oppositionis, employed in the path of the strategic opposition. I already explained, synthetically, that the path of the strategic opposition consists in the employment of the akermonic technique, which means the disposition of an akermone, or strategic enclosure, and of a lapis oppositionis out of the enclosure, in the fenestra infernalis that takes to the Velplades. Applying the law of the enclosure to the akermone can be isolated the area of the Velplades, it means, it is achieved to liberate an area in the world of the Demiurge. But, this is not enough. It is necessary that the initiates, synchronizing from the time of the world, generate an own time, inverse, which allow them to go towards the origin. For this they practice the strategic opposition against the lapis oppositionis, that are situated over of rune, in the Velplades, in front of the fenestra infernalis. Now it is time to approximate to the major secret, the one that explains the method employed by the gods to maintain, continuously, eternally if it is desired, the Grail, in the world. I will start inquiring in this. What is the residence of the loyal gods? I will start from a known answer that I have repeated many times. The gods reside in Katava, in the Valhalla of Agartha. That answer is correct, but insufficient, because it would have to be asked at the same time, what is the Valhalla? Where it is? In front of these questions can be adopted two criterions. First, appealing to elements of the Norse mythology and say, for example, that on the top of the Ashidrazal is the Valhalla, hall in which the warriors killed in battle, reigned by Wetan, etc. And a second criterion, which seems to me appropriated, consists to despoil the answers from folk ornaments, and to express them using symbols of the Hyperborean wisdom, which will be easily interpreted through analogies. With this criterion, it is possible to affirm immediately that the Valhalla is the liberated area by the gods or is in some place of the universe of the One. This area, naturally, have the dimensions of a country, and it is totally fortified. The lords of Venus live there, and many gods and Valkyries, who permanently prepare themselves for the fight, while they await the end of the Kali Yuga, and the awakening of the captive spirits. Their incalculable warrior gods, immortalized with their bodies of Vehra, forming the rows of the wilders Helia, the furious army of Wetan, and patrol the walls of the Valhalla, even though the enemy never would dare to face such redoubtable Hyperborean garrison. The gods have liberated the strong area of the Valhalla, applying, with their powerful wills, the law of the enclosure, to the walls of stone. The conquest of the own time that reigns in Valhalla, and make them independent from every cycle, or law, of the world of the Demiurge, proceeds from a wonderful operation of strategic opposition. But which stone could have been, the lapis oppositionis, that the gods employed on their Hyperborean strategy? Since the conflict of the origins occurred, millions years ago, the gods practiced the strategic opposition, against a beautiful extraterrestrial gem provided for that purpose by the gallant lord, Christus Lucifer. That stone calls Grel. Dieser Steen is Grelgenant. Wolfram von Ischenbach. The analogic relation between Akermone and Valhalla turns even more evident if it is considered that this possesses a porta infernalis, equivalent to the fenestra infernalis, of it. The porta infernalis is an aperture on the wall which is permanently patrolled by attentive sentinels. In front of the porta infernalis, but out of the Valhalla, it means, in the world, is situated the Grail, over of rune. Against it, according to what I have said, the gods practice the strategic opposition. It is necessary to go a little deeper on the description of this disposition, due to the extraordinary importance for the approximation to the mystery of the Grail. First of all, I will say that the Grail, as a lapis oppositionis, was deposited in the origin, over of rune, and is still there. over the Varun and in the origin. It is not a wordplay, but a property of the Grail, that must be carefully examined. The Grail, as a reflection of the origin, can't be coming in time in similarity to the material things created by the Demiurge. In other words, the Grail can't be in the present. The Grail is really in the ancient time, in the time and place when it was placed, and due to this can't be searched employing movement and time to achieve it, because that attitude aims to the future. It means on inverse sense, just as I already explained. But if the Grail is in the past, if time doesn't move it to the present with its irrepressible creep like occurs with the material objects, and has always remained there in the past, how do we know about it? And, the most important, how can it act in the present, just as the odal strategy requires, prescinding from time? That's to say, in virtue of which element is connected to the Grail, from the past with the present, for example, with a Hyperborean leader. The solution to those problems has constituted, since ancient times, a dangerous secret that now I will try to reveal. The enigma is resolved reasoning in this way. The Grail has remained always in the past, property that only has the gem of Christus Lucifer in the universe. The same has not happened with the Varun that sustained it, and that still sustains. Here is the great secret. While the Grail, reflection of the divine origin, remains situated in the origin, the Varun whereon was situated has crossed the millenniums, and has arrived to the present. Indeed, the Varun is always present. What means? In any historic circumstance. I will talk a little about the Varun. It is known as the Varun of the origin, or Varun of VILLCA, but it must be clarified that such names not only designate the symbol of the Varun, but also the terrestrial stone, which was the primordial seat of the Grail. For this reason, when the Hyperborean wisdom realizes the allusion to the Varun of VILLCA, what it is really referring to is a stone, ancient, violet blue colored, in which the gods engraved a runic sign of VILLCA. It is necessary, then, to know the provenance of the same and the reason of its construction. I already mentioned in other opportunities that in a beginning the gods entered to the solar system by the door of Venus, and that a group of them, the traitor gods, who associated to the plan of the Demiurge, provoking later, in combination with this, the catastrophe of the captive spirits. The Hyperborean spirits were chained to the matter, because they fell in a cosmic ambush, the mystery of Elev, but I will not talk about it now. The effect produced in the evolutive world of the Demiurge, when incarcerated the confused spirits, is what we would call today a collective mutation. To the evil of the imitative alternation of the matter, made by the Demiurge, added later the evil of the mutation of his creation, and the incarceration of the spirits, that is to say, the modification of the plan realized by the traitor gods. And to control such evil plan, the traitor gods decided to found the White Fraternity, in which must be organized the different device manifestations of the Demiurge. The command center of the power, Shambhala, is also that key of the collective mutation of the seven realms of the nature. In effect, in which way the Demiurge maintained the stability of the form over the earth, and how he ensured, before the mutation, that the seven realms evolve according to his plan. There are two principles that intervene in the execution of the plan, one static, and other dynamic. The plan supports statically on the archetypes, and dynamically in the breath of the solar legis. It means that was a force coming from the sun, physical vehicle of the solar legis, which maintained the evolutive impulse of the seven realms of the terrestrial nature. Well, to produce any permanent alteration in the plan of the Demiurge is indispensable to intercept the energetic current coming from the sun, which, traversing the ocean of prana, converges over the earth. To comply with this condition, the traitor gods placed themselves since the beginning between the sun and the earth, in a fixed position which never led to pass not a single ray of light, it means, not a photon, without being previously intercepted. This affirmation could seem to be fantastic, and it really is, but more fantastic and senseless has been the construction of Chang Shambhala, given the fact that we have described it, is the technical function of the center of the power of the traitor's gods. Here is another secret, which is no longer such. The location of Chang Shambhala will be able to be determined now starting from this data, is always placed between the Earth and the Sun. Chang Shambhala is in reality very close to the Earth, what will give an idea of its great size. However, it is not due to a caprice, it had to be constructed in this way, due to the requirements of its modulating function of the genetic solar plasma. Of course, we'll not miss the one who foolishly say that all this is a nonsense, because the traditions of the Tibet and India affirm that Chang Shambhala is a kingdom situated in Asia, among the mountains of Altai, the Gobi Desert, and the Himalayas. Undoubtedly, a commentary of this kind will constitute a major nonsense than my affirmations. In principle, the famous traditions of the Tibet and India are products of the strategic disinformation that the fraternity has dispersed for centuries to make the truth be ignored. And in second place, I will say that the most serious references of the tradition, because there are some worth of credit, always mention the location of the door of Chang Shambhala, but never the kingdom itself. This subtle distinction is highly suggestive, because the fact that in determined geographic place exists a door, not imply that the kingdom be immediately behind. Could be understood in this way, by a primitive mind, conditioned by the belief that the straight line is the shorter distance between 2 points, and indeed this usually occurs. But, here I am managing information in other level, and because of this I will advance 4 verses of the chant of the Princess Issa, which soon will have the opportunity to know, when I relate the story of Nimrod, the defeated. Even if Dajung is far, its doors are everywhere. 7 doors has Dajung, and 7 walls surround it. To those induced doors, refer the Oriental legends, those that are everywhere, and guide to the kingdom that not occupies a simple geographic place. A reference to such ancient events, like the wicked association between the traitor gods and the Demiurge, has as a finality to serve as an introduction to a fact that I will immediately stand out. When the Demiurge agree with the traitor gods to give them the control of the hierarchy, he give to them the sign of Tiferet, which represents one of the 10 Zephyret, and allows a total control over the formal aspects of the creation. The sign of Tiferet is the symbolic expression of the material manifestation of the divine archetypes, aspect that is usually synthesized as the beauty of the Demiurge. If it has not been well comprehended, it is convenient to repeat that the demons of Chang Shambhala remained in possession of a sign that represents the entire Tiferet aspect of the Demiurge, permitting to access to it, and to share its power. Naturally, the sign of Tiferet is the key of Maya, the illusion of the real, and because of this, the most terrible sorcery tool. Who observes the sing of Tiferet, which is very complex, from the world, it means, karmically incarnated, takes the risk to fall immediately into an abyss, losing every reference point, and, due to this also the reason. Because of this, the Hyperborean wisdom recommends to apply the law of the enclosure on the sign of Tiferet to be able to watch it without risk. It is not pointless to signalize that in every Hyperborean offensive against the demons of Chang Shambhala, sooner or later produces a confrontation with the sign of Tiferet, because it is trusted on its disastrous influence to defeat the awakened men. After that, the traitor gods received the sign of Tiferet, and constructed Chang Shambhala, was not possible for the loyal gods to stay over the terrestrial surface. But they neither wanted to abandon the solar system, leaving billions of captive spirits behind. So then, they planned the Odal strategy. But before, what Mark presented the captive spirit? Basically the loss of the origin, and the consequent unconsciousness, it means, the loss of the own time. The incarceration to the matter was fundamentally the incarceration to the immanent flow of the consciousness of the Demiurge, that means, of the synchronization to the time of the world. The captive spirits, linked to the time, would take millions of years to recover their consciousness, if someday they achieve it. In those circumstances the gods, in a wonderful exhibition of courage and intrepidity, give inception to the Odal strategy. The first problem that they had to deal with was to maintain themselves independent from the time, but not out of it, because they would have to follow closely the disgraces of the captive spirits, to help them to avoid their strategic confusion, and, eventually, rescue them. On the other hand, the independence of the time was necessary to permit that the gods could conserve their own time, their consciousness of the origin, because, in other way they would take the risk to fall also in the great deceit. But, while the eons passed, the gods would have to dispose of a pleasant place, adequate to be occupied and defended by a garrison of terrible stellar warriors. Those were the main problems. There were others, but I will overlook them in homage to the brevity. The procedure to be followed was the next. The loyal gods searched a place of the earth convenient to their purposes. As such place would disappear, after the strategic opposition, they didn't choose it, inside of a continent, because this could have occasioned a cataclysm that would retard even more the destiny of the captive spirits. For this reason, they searched over the islands, and they chose one of them, situated in what today would be the extreme north, but, in those days was a tropical zone, proceeding immediately to fence it. Being an enormous island, the work to be realized, to build a cyclopean wall of stone, on its entire perimeter, would seem today an impossible work. But the Hyperborean wisdom that the gods disposed gave them the solutions to end quickly with the work, and in a shorter time a colossal wall transformed the paradisiacal island in an impregnable fortress. It is not possible to describe the extraterrestrial architecture of the walls, because I'd lose on explanations, and would not advance too much. I will only say that, in some sections the construction was similar to the pre-Incan of Sacsayhuaman, close to Cusco, in Peru, but such similarity, I have to say also, was too approximate, because Sacsayhuaman is still very human. In the wall, they made just one aperture, thing that will surprise to those who don't know the strategic principle of the Hyperborean wisdom. And out of this aperture, which I already named with a modern denomination, Porta Infernalis, was placed the Varuna Orichalcum. Thus, it is time to go back to talk about the major mystery. The great chief, Christus Lucifer, audaciously installed on an unthinkable place, behind Venus, as the Black Sun, or expression of the spirit, decided to respond to the vile conspiracy of the traitor gods with an act of war. To comply with his will, was that the liberators gods occupied the island, and walled it, initiating the Odal strategy. But, the Odal strategy had as purpose to awake, and orientate men, individually or racially, we already said. Then, in what consisted the act of war, which Christus Lucifer responded to the betrayal of the gods of Chang Shambhala? Specifically in, the strike of war was given by the Grail. The Hyperborean gem, taken from the brow of the gallant lord, and placed in the world of the Demiurge, would avoid the demons to deny the divine origin of the spirit, because its brightness unable to be sullied would illuminate in every moment the reflections of the primordial homeland. The Grail, at divinizing the Hyperborean lineages, would constitute the major challenge, because threatened to end with the infernal plans. The conflict would be, since then, eternally propounded by anyone who achieved to wake up, no matter in what hell could be situated, because the Grail would be placed in the physical plane, that is to say, in the lowest infernal regions, and its bright would be seen from every corner of the world, including the astral plane, and all those purgatories, that the demons prepare to deceive the spirits. Even in those subtle planes of the monads, emanated by the Demiurge, were also spirits completely idiotized, to whom they made believe that they must stay there, while their other bodies, more dense, evolve. Ultimately, the Grail was, if the metaphor is allowed to me, a glove thrown on the face of the demons, for a challenge that they, due to their cowardice, would not be able to respond. But it was not so easy to make that the Grail, once situated in the physical plane, remained simply located in one place, for example on an altar. because of its timeless character, as reflection of the origin. The Grail, like a real universal dilute, would cross everything, and it would lose from sight. Especially if who look at it elapsed the time of the world. The Grail can't be situated over any substance that flows by impulse of the breath of the letters. It means that flows temporarily, because it would be lost in the past, due to its essence is always in the origin. What must we do? We need to prepare a material seat for the Grail, in such way that it supports the Grail, even if it remains on the past, and even if the time of the world elapses effectively for this seat. Can be constructed something like that? Only if between the substance of the seat and Grail is intercalated a sign that neutralizes the temporality. This means that the sign must represent the inverse movement to the employed by the demiurge to build the solar system. A sign like this, which is the higher of the heretic symbols, was employed by the gods to build the seat for the Grail, which I have called Varuna VILLCA. Attention to this, because I will only tell it once. From the Varuna VILLCA, which is a sign very complex, and of higher magic power, is derived previous mutilation and deformation, the swastika rune, of which has been written many nonsenses. To build the seat of the Grail, they opted for a crystalline stone violet-blue colored, similar to an agate. On its upper part, in a slightly concave zone, was engraved the Varuna VILLCA, skillfully chiseled by the loyal gods. And once concluded, the seat was deposited out of the walls of the island, in direction to the Porta Infernalis, but, many miles from there, on a continental region. It will be difficult for anyone to imagine the wonderful spectacle of the Grail descending to the seven hells. Perhaps, if someone thinks in a green ray, of blinding brightness, and gnostic influence over who see it, which presents make the demons turn away, their fierce faces, frozen by the horror. A ray that, as a blinding blade of invincible sword, goes ripping the 400,000 worlds of the deceit, searching the heart of the enemy. A green flying serpent, that carries within its teeth the fruit of the truth, until then denied, and occulted. If someone thinks in the ray, in the sword, in the fruit, in the serpent, perhaps, then will be possible to intuit what happened, in that crucial moment in which the truth was placed available for the captive spirits. Yes, because since the Grail has situated on the Varuna VILLCA, the tree of the science remained planted for all those who, completely confused, lived in hell thinking that they were living in paradise. From now on, they would be able to eat from its fruit, and their eyes would be opened. Alleluia for Christus Lucifer, the serpent of the paradise. Alleluia for those who have eaten the forbidden fruit, the awake and transmuted man. What was the next step of the gods? Previously to the fall of the Grail, but when this phenomenon was already happening in other planes, applied the law of the enclosure to the walls of the island, isolating the internal area from the external. To comprehend the effect that such strategic action produced, has to be considered that this was the first time that an area was liberated in the solar system. When the ring of fire seemed to lean out from the imposing walls, and the interior of the island was not possible to see anymore, wrapped in a weird vibrational and blazing cloud, the demiurge started to feel amputated his substance. The strategy at the gods aimed to defeat him, not only in the flat area of the island, but also its relief, mountains and valleys, lakes and forests, vegetables and animals. The island, vast country, was also a great Noah's Ark which would receive for millenniums to the man that have achieved to wake up and escape from the material chains, and also to those who had transmuted fighting to the death in battles. An entire country subtracted from the imminent control of the demiurge was a new experience, but, even how this could be possible, the truth is that the island was still there, occulted by a fire barrier but in the same place. Is for this reason that, the reaction of the demiurge made shake the earth, searching to affect in some way that incomprehensible phenomenon, and recover the dominance of the area. Terrible tsunamis stirred the adjacent seas, and winds never seen before blew vainly against the titanic walls. the sky obscured by the clouds of volcanic ashes suddenly awakened, and the depths of the ocean threatened to break, trying to swallow the liberated island. The world seemed to be mad, showing the terrifying spectacle of all the forces of the nature uncontrolled, when, as the major of the abominations, the Grail, descended to the earth. What could I add, to give an idea of what happened there? I already said that it's very difficult to describe, and even to mention, an incident that generated a perpetual irritation on the demons. Perhaps this commentary tell you something, Doctor, if you remember the Kabbalistic explanations of Bore and BELICENA. When the Grail fell over the earth, beyond the 370 times 10,000 worlds, the great face of the ancient screamed a howl of horror that can still be heard reverberating in the confines of the cosmos. Once the Grail has situated over the ruin of VILLCA, the loyal gods practiced the strategic opposition, achieving this time that the walled island turned invisible, disappearing forever from the terrestrial surface. Thenceforth the asleep men would talk about the Valhalla, the abode of the gods, and also of Hyperborea, the island swallowed by the sea, because the original myth, transmitted charismatically by the gods, has suffered different falls in the exoterism, due to the impurity of blood of the asleep men.